What comes to mind when I say the name Honda? Perhaps you think of the new NSX or maybe the Civic Type-R. Or maybe you think about some of Honda's incredible TV ads, or their amazing run of success in Formula One in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. Well, as fantastic as all of the TV ads were, as successful as the Formula One team was, and as brilliant as the Civic Type-R and the Honda NSX have been every generation, fundamentally Honda is a car company. They are very good at building very normal cars. Without very normal cars, we wouldn't get the really exciting stuff that gets our hearts racing. And so today, we're with this, the new Honda CR-V Hybrid. It isn't loud, it isn't fast, it isn't hugely exciting, but it is one of the most complicated cars Honda has ever made. And that's saying something. The first generation CR-V was launched way back in 1995, and it was Honda's first attempt at a mass market SUV. After that we had the second generation CR-V, and that got a little bit bigger, a little bit safer, a little bit more economical. Then the third generation CR-V, and again it was bigger, safer, more economical. And then we had the fourth generation CR-V, and you guessed it, it was bigger, it was safer, and it was more economical. To get maximum economy out of a CR-V though, Honda has always relied on diesel, and that's fair enough. Diesels are incredibly economical over long distances. But to improve economy and to reduce emissions in the city, Honda needed to do something different with this, the fifth generation CR-V. And so for the first time in a Honda SUV available in Europe, this car comes with a hybrid powertrain. What do you need to know? Well, the CR-V Hybrid has a 2-litre petrol engine, which combines with a lithium-ion battery pack and 2 electric motors, one for propulsion and one as a generator. All in all, you've got 181 brake horsepower and 315 newton meters of torque. Depending on whether or not you go for all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive, you should see between 50 and 53 miles to the gallon. Crucially though, in the city, because this is a hybrid and because it can run on electric power alone, you should still see around 50 miles to the gallon. 0 to 62 miles an hour takes between 8.8 and 9.2 seconds, again depending on the model, and the top speed is 112 miles an hour. Firstly, because it's a hybrid, because it's got that electric power and an automatic transmission, pulling away from the line is surprisingly effortless and actually surprisingly quick. And because you can run the car on full EV mode, you've got a little button on the center console here that just says EV, it's quite self-explanatory really, you can drive around completely silently. I will never tire of driving a car that makes no noise at all. Secondly, Honda hasn't used a traditional CVT transmission, a constant variable transmission. Now, without getting into too much detail, the system they've used means that there should be a much better response from the powertrain. And truth be told, the first time I drove this car, that's the thing I noticed. The response from the whole system is much better than I was expecting. As I said, you can drive this car in full EV mode, but you can also drive it where the engine powers the batteries. It's essentially ticking over, whilst the batteries are powering the electric motors and the electric motors are driving the wheels. You can also, if you put your foot all the way to the floor, that's when the whole system works together to give you maximum acceleration. All the power goes to the wheels. But interestingly, at times, like when you're cruising on the motorway for example, it's the engine that is doing all the work. The electric motors aren't doing anything. Why does it do that? Well, partly it's to save energy for when you get into a city or a town and then you want to drive around on the battery power only, but also the petrol engine is better at high speeds anyway, it's more efficient. You're kind of just wasting energy if you're using the batteries and the electric motors to drive yourself along at 70 miles an hour. It's incredibly complicated, but the whole system works absolutely seamlessly. It's very, very easy to drive. And what's good as well is that there's always enough charge in the batteries. There's always enough charge so that when you get to a quiet village, you can put the car in EV mode. The steering, it's very light and the whole car is very soft, very comfortable, which in turn means there's a fair bit of roll, but if you're buying a CR-V hybrid, or in fact any CR-V, you're going to be less concerned about roll and handling than if you were in the market for something like a Cayenne Turbo, for example. There is a sport button on the centre console as well, which just seems a little bit odd. It definitely makes the throttle a bit more responsive, but to be honest, the whole system is responsive enough anyway, and pressing a sport button in a CR-V hybrid, it just doesn't suit the character of the car. What you really need to know is that the boot is big, although with the CR-V hybrid you get a little bit less space in the boot. You don't get a spare wheel, for example, and you can't have this car with 7 seats because all of the batteries are stored underneath the boot floor. You get LED headlights, you get Bluetooth, you get a DAB radio, and you get heated wing mirrors as standard. It is worth noting that the entry-level trim gets a 5-inch touchscreen, whereas every other model in the range gets a 7-inch touchscreen. And with the other models you can get all sorts of extra little goodies like satellite navigation, a blind spot monitoring system, parking sensors, a reversing camera, cruise control, and so on. This particular car is a top-of-the-range EX model, which with its £550 optional modern steel metallic paint, it's £37,305. That's quite a lot of money, but then again it does come with a heated steering wheel and a power tailgate, which quite frankly never gets old. What don't I like? Well, the navigation system works quite well, but the interface feels quite old. What to make of the CR-V hybrid? Well, it just feels incredibly accomplished. Yes, it's not as exciting as something like a Civic Type-R or an NSX, cars we see so often here at Goodwood. But considering this is Honda's first hybrid SUV, it's really impressive, especially at such a reasonable price.